Algebra 2 5.4b, factor a trinomial square. If you haven't seen the previous video, when we did greatest common factor, you might get lost or confused, well, you probably will. And there's a link in this video's description so you can click on it and watch it real quick and then come back. All right? Squares of binomials are also called trinomial squares. They have the form a squared plus 2ab plus b squared, or a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. See, it's like a square sandwich. It's got an a squared in the front and a b squared in the back. And in the middle, we either have a 2 plus 2ab or a minus 2ab. See? Remember, factoring is the reverse of multiplication. And to recognize a trinomial square, and for a trinomial to be a square in the first place, 3 conditions must be true. The first one is 2 of the terms must be squares, a squared and b squared, the front and the back. There must be no minus signs before the a squared or b squared. When you look at these, there's no minus sign in front of that a squared, and there's a plus sign in front of the b squared, isn't there? The third condition is if we multiply the square roots of a squared and b squared and double the results, we get the remaining term 2 times a times b, or its additive inverse, negative 2 times a times b. See? So we take these two equations, and to factor trinomial squares, we use these equations. If you see a plus in front of the 2, then in the parentheses, it's going to be a plus b squared. If you see a minus in front of the 2, then there's going to be a minus b squared. See? In the middle? It's very easy. If there's a plus, then there's going to be a plus. If there's a minus, there's going to be a minus. All right? We can factor these coming up ones as trinomial squares. Now look at this. What times what is x squared? X times x. What times what is negative 10x? Now remember, it's got a negative here. And it's got to be in the form of 2ab. So we need to multiply one of these and one of these by 2 in order to get the middle one. So it's got to be a negative, so we know it's going to have a negative in there. So we could do 2x, because it has to be 2a, right? So we know we've got a 2x, times what is negative 10x? Well, it's got to be a negative 5. So that means this has to be a negative 5. Because if that's a and b, then that's b. Negative 5 times negative 5. 2 negatives make a positive. See how I got that? It's 2ab. And if this is a, so that this is a, and that's b, because we're right here, it's telling us that b is a negative 5. So we have negative 5 times negative 5. We pull one of these, x, and a negative 5, and we write it in parentheses squared. See? Take a look at this one. This one needs to be rearranged so that the 56y is in the middle, and that perfect square 49 is in the back. We need to have a square in the front and a square in the back, and that 56y is in the wrong place. So because of the commutative property says that we can do it in any order, we can move this 56y to the center and put the 49 in the back. Now we have perfect squares in the front and back like we're supposed to. What times what makes 16y squared? A 4y times a 4y. Now we've got our a. This has to be 2 times a times b, so we're going to do 2 times 4y. That's 8y. Well, 8y times what would be a 56y? A 7. And that fits perfectly because b would be 7. See? 7 times 7 is 49. We pull one of these, a, and the b, and they all have plus signs. There's a plus sign there in front of the 56. So we know in parentheses it's going to be a plus sign, 4y plus 7 squared. See? Let's take a look at this one. We have to rearrange these terms so that the 4y squared is first. This negative 20xy doesn't belong in the front. It told us we can't have a negative in front, didn't it? There's no minus sign before it, and it's not a square, is it? 4 times 5 is 20, or 2 times 10, right? So this doesn't belong here. We're going to put it in the middle. 2 times 2 is 4, and 5 times 5 is 25. So that should be the a and the b, shouldn't it? So we're going to put the 4y squared in the front, the negative 20xy in the middle, and the 25x squared in the back. What times what makes 4y squared? 2y times 2y. Now we've got our a, and this has got to be 2 times a times b, doesn't it? So we need 2 times 2y. That gives us a 4y. But we need to get to a negative 20, xy. So we're going to have to add an x, aren't we? So in order to get a negative 20xy, this 4y needs to be multiplied to a negative 5x. Now we'd get a negative 20x. So now we know our a and our b. And because there's a minus sign here, in the parentheses there's going to be a minus sign, isn't there? So we get 2y minus 5x, and then we square the outside, see? And this negative 5x and that negative 5x makes a positive 25x squared, see? Now sometimes your teacher's going to try to trick you. Or there'll be a trick on a test if you're taking like SATs or math placement tests. There's going to be a trick. And it's going to say, is this a trinomial square? So what times what is 36y squared? 6y times 6y. Now we've got our a. We know the middle has to be 2ab. So 2 times 6y is 12y. And 7 times 7 is 49. Well, 12 times 7 is 84y. 12y times 7 is 84y, not 42y. So that is wrong. This is not a trinomial square. And you can write that as the answer. See? So don't let it trick you, okay? If it doesn't work out, go over it again to make sure you're right and say not a trinomial square. Trinomial squares also occur in higher degree polynomials. In this one, we've got x to the 4th. And we've got y to the 6th in the back, don't we? If you saw the previous video, you know that we can break this up. And the product rule of exponents says that we add exponents. So this 25x to the 4th could be 5x squared times 5x squared, couldn't it? Now we've got our a. It's got to be multiplied by 2. 2 times 5x squared is 10x squared. What do we need to multiply 10x squared by to get this 70x squared y to the 3rd? Well, we got 10x squared. So the only thing that's missing is a 7 and the y to the 3rd. See? Now we've got our b. And if we look at this, 49 is 7 times 7, and that would be y to the 3rd times y to the 3rd. So it fits perfectly. So we pull our a and our b. There's a plus sign here. So there's going to be a plus sign in the middle. We got 5x squared plus 7y to the 3rd in parentheses squared. See? So don't get worried if you see large exponents. Just break them up, okay? Now this one, I want you to wear your thinking caps because this one's going to be a little bit more difficult. We need to think forward and backward about what we're doing. We have to think about where did our numbers come from and what will they make and where they're going, okay? So in this one, we've got negative 4y squared minus 144y to the 8th plus 48y to the 5th. Now, right away I can see that they're not in the order. 12 times 12 is 144. 2 times 2 is 4. And we can't have a minus back here. So we're going to leave it like this for now. And we're going to remove a common factor. We're going to factor out that greatest common factor of negative 4y squared. Okay? If you saw the previous video, you can have a rough idea of what we're going to do here. We're going to break these exponents up. Okay? So if we want to pull a y squared out of a y to the 8th, we can look at this as y squared plus 6. And this is y to the 5th. So we're going to look at it as a y squared plus 3. So that tells us what we've got left over after we factor out the y squared. See? Negative 4y squared times 1 gets us a negative 4y squared. And 4y squared goes into negative 4y 36 times. See? With that 6 left over. So it would be negative 4y squared times 36y to the 6th to give us a negative 144y to the 8th. See? We're trying to figure out what times what would equal that. Now we need to figure out what times what is going to equal that. And it's, well, actually it's negative 4y squared times what equals that, isn't it? So negative 4y squared times a negative 12y to the 3rd will give us a positive 48y to the 5th. This 2 and that 3 on the y is going to make that 5. That negative and that negative will make that positive. Okay? So now we're going to pull out the 1, the 36y to the 6th, and that negative 12y to the 3rd. we've already factored out our negative 4y squared, so it's going to come in front of the parentheses here. Then we're going to have our 1, but we need to move this negative 12y thirds up here. We can't have a negative back here. We're going to move this guy up here, and we're going to move this guy back here. Now, when we look at this, we're still not done. We have to look at this as if we were starting from the beginning with this one, okay? So we've got our a is a 1, and what times what makes 36y squared? Because we can split that up, can't we? A negative 6y to the third times a negative 6y to the third will make a positive 6y to the 6th. Because we have to look at this as 1 is our a, so we have 2 times 1, right? To follow this, we need a 2ab. So if 1 is our a, we've got 2 times 1, that's positive. We need to get to a negative 12y to the third. So we're going to have to multiply it by a negative 6y to the third to get to that negative 12y to the third. Which means this has to be, if that's our b, then we know b is negative 6y to the third times negative 6y to the third to get to the positive one, see? So got to watch our signs. We have to think ahead and think back. We need to come from here and move forward so that it makes sense. So now we know our a is 1 and our b is negative 6y to the third. So we've got our factored out negative 4y squared out here, and our binomial square is 1 minus 6y to the third squared. See? A, b. And if we open this up so that this was opened up like this, as 2 of them, because that's what the square means, doesn't it? And we used FOIL and the distributive property, we'd go right back to our original expression, this one. Isn't that something? So I know this can be really confusing. This last one was the toughest one. You have to know when to stick the number into the back to make it a square. See? Can't have a minus sign back here, and that is the square. So even though we factored out that negative 4y squared, we can still look at it as the 3 terms of these easier ones. See? 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times, so you can look at that. If that was 1 squared, it would still be 1 times 1, right? We could say 1 squared minus 12y to the third, see? So we could still kind of do it that a squared plus 2ab plus b squared way, or minus 2ab in this case, right? Because there's a minus sign in front of that 12. We just pulled it out. What times what makes that number with that sign, and that's what goes in the parentheses. And we factored that out, see? So if you're really confused and you didn't see that previous video, shame, shame. You need to go back and watch it, all right? Each of my videos go in order, teaching a little bit on top of the previous thing. So if you miss one, you're missing a lot, all right? Our next video, 5.4c, we're going to talk about how to factor the differences of 2 squares. I'm going to add this video to the Algebra 2 playlist so you can use it to study. There's going to be a link to the Chapter 5 playlist on exponents and polynomials from Algebra 1, and any previous videos from Chapter 5 that would lead up to this video is going to be in this description, so you can just click on them, all right? So I don't want anyone to get lost. I want you to keep watching each video in order so that you say, okay, I remember that from the last one. Okay, I remember that from 2 videos ago. And if you do forget, because it was, a week or something and you haven't seen it, go back and watch it again, all right? You have to take control of your destiny, all right? You have the power. I'll see you next video. Bye.